everybody. We have a packed agenda. We're going to start with communications. Carla, would you please read our opening statement?
Did you want the...
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. We have an opening statement from our esteemed council.
Welcome to Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinance. Testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, then please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on, and when your time is done, then you'll see a red light. If you are in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Disruptive conduct such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations will not be tolerated. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in a person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for your help. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have 5 people who've signed up for council communications. Each person will get 3 minutes, and all you need to do is give us your name. Carla, would you please start with council item 356?
Request of Kimberly McCullough to address council regarding Portland Police Bureau cooperation with the FBI and membership in the Joint Terrorism Task Force.
Yes. Why don't you read council item 357, and we'll have Mr. German join the result.
357, request of Michael German to address council regarding Portland Police Bureau cooperation with the FBI and membership in the Joint Terrorism Task Force.
And Mr. German, we have your full statement, which will be made part of the record.
Good morning, Commissioner Fish and members of the council. My name is Kimberly McCullough. I am the policy director at the ACLU of Oregon. The ACLU of Oregon is part of a broad coalition of many organizations and endorsers that have renewed a campaign to end Portland's participation in the Joint Terrorism Task Force. You may recall that several of us testified back on November 8th of last year, and I would refer you to the testimony we submitted at that time. I would be happy to email it to you all again if you would like that for your reference. It outlines the history of Portland's relationship and points the lack thereof with the JTTF. As you may recall, we also submitted a letter to council at that time, and I have now submitted an updated letter that has additional campaign endorsers added. Your other guest speaker this morning, Michael German, has also submitted testimony, as you just noted. Some of you may also remember that he was here back in 2011. We asked Mike German to join us today and to speak to you because he is a preeminent expert on national security. He's a fellow with the Brennan Center for Justice's Liberty and National Security Program, which seeks to ensure that our government respects human rights and fundamental freedoms in conducting the fight against terrorism. His work focuses on law enforcement and intelligent oversight and reform. He's a 16-year veteran of federal law enforcement, and he served as a special agent with the FBI, where he specialized in domestic terrorism and covert operations. He also served as a counterterrorism instructor at the FBI National Academy. He became what I would describe as a whistleblower in 2004 when he became aware of serious problems and deficiencies in the FBI's counterterrorism operations, many of which failed to keep the public safe while at the same time violating the civil rights and liberties of our communities. He reported those deficiencies to Congress, and then he resigned. He then began lecturing on counterterrorism and intelligence matters and served as an adjunct professor of law enforcement and terrorism at the National Defense University. He then joined the ACLU's Washington, D.C. Legislative Office staff in 2006. As I mentioned already, he's now with the Brennan Center's Liberty and National Security Program. We're both cognizant of the fact that we have very limited time with you here today, so I do encourage you to read Mike's testimony. I also want to note that it really is just the tip of the iceberg, and we would be happy to provide you with additional supporting materials and also to your staff. And I would like to acknowledge and thank the council members who have taken the time to either meet with us personally or to have your staff meet with us since our campaign began last November. I'm going to end here and let Mike speak, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, welcome.
Thank you. And thanks again for having me here. I appreciate being invited back. When I worked on the Joint Terrorism Task Forces in the early 1990s, I worked under a standard that is very similar to the standard in the Oregon statute. I needed to have a reasonable indication that somebody was involved in criminal activity or would soon be involved in criminal activity in order to justify targeting them for investigation. And what I found working cases, including undercover cases against very hard targets like neo-Nazis and anti-government militias, was that this standard was not just something that was there to protect civil liberties and the privacy of innocent people, but actually made me more effective as an investigator, because it forced me to have the discipline of documenting what evidence I had about every individual I was coming across to make sure that what was directing my investigations was evidence and not bias. You know, if there was somebody who said something that frightened me, if there was somebody who looked very scary to me, it didn't matter if I couldn't put down on a piece of paper the evidence necessary to target them. And that is what made my cases effective, because at every turn I was being forced to turn back towards where the evidence lay. And that's why after 9/11, when the FBI immediately started reducing those standards, first through the Patriot Act by removing some of the guidelines on foreign intelligence collection powers, and through the Attorney General guidelines, which are the rules that govern the FBI, I became very concerned that this would be used to target the usual suspects, immigrant communities, communities of color, and political dissidents. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. When I first got hired as a consultant by the ACLU, it was to look over some JTTF documents where a number of groups, including groups like Greenpeace and the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, were being targeted by Joint Terrorism Task Force investigations. Unfortunately, the guidelines since those events have actually gotten looser to where there is now, under the 2008 Guidelines instituted by Michael McCasey, no factual predicate required for the FBI to conduct what they call assessments, which can include recruiting informants and sending informants against you over and covert interviews, grand jury subpoenas to get telephone subscriber information. These are very intrusive tools. And what we've seen is they are used remarkably against political activists. And you might have seen this summer, the FBI put out a report that leaked out, because they don't put a lot of these reports out, on black identity extremists that seem to be describing the Black Lives Matter movement. And sure enough, many of these Black Lives Matter activists have been targeted with these interviews. So I know my time is up, but I appreciate your attention.
Well, Commissioner Fritz and I think both remember when you were here in 2011. Thank you for joining us today, and again, your full statement is part of the record. Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you.
Carla, would you please read Council Item 358?
Request of Stephanie Hansen to address council regarding the housing crisis.
Is Ms. Hanson here? Welcome. Just read your full name. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Gerald Garner. I'm here on behalf of the property owners at 84 Northeast Killingsworth. When I signed up, I was signing up to speak with you regarding a vacation of the right-of-way, which the city has, right in front of the property. It's about an 8-foot strip of land, about 100 feet wide, or 200 feet wide. Since then, D. Walker has reached out to me to document our efforts to obtain management support for a city-initiated vacation. The issue is non-owner occupied. The owners of properties who don't occupy the properties, they're very non-responsive. And so for the last 3 years, we've been working on obtaining signatures from people who do not occupy properties that is next to impossible to even get a response or an objection on a signature. And so with that said, we would ask for the commission's support of a management or the city's initiated vacation.
So, sir, just my own edification, so does that fall within the Bureau of Development Services?
No, I don't believe so. I think Peabody, D. Walker says,
Peabody.
right.
Okay. So, Mr. Saltzman, is this on your radar?
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you for coming forward. Dan's the Transportation Secretary. It's
Okay.
now brought to his attention.
Okay, well, thank you.
We'll look into it.
Okay.
Thank you, sir, for joining
Thank
us.
you.
Carla, we have one more request, item number 360.
Request of D. White to address council regarding dangerous levels of lead in our drinking water.
Good morning, Ms. White.
Hello, my name is Dee White. I'm sorry and sad to report that among all large cities in the U.S., Portland continues to lead with dangerous lead levels in our drinking water. We're number one. There's no safe level of lead. Lead is tasteless, odorless, and invisible. It is well documented how the effects of lead poisoning on babies and young children, even at low-level exposure, are profound and irreversible. And now, a new Lancet study estimates that more than 400,000, that's 18%, of all adult deaths in the U.S. every year can be linked to chronic lead exposure. The American Academy of Pediatrics has called for no more than 1 part per billion in drinking water. The FDA requires bottled water to be less than 5 parts per billion. Lead tests in Portland last year showed the highest level was 59 parts per billion. The year before that, it was 648 parts per billion. Portland Water Bureau has exceeded the EPA's limit twice during the past 18 months. While Flint, Michigan suffered acute lead exposure 4 years ago, Portlanders have endured chronic levels of lead for the past 25 years. We have a silent public health crisis going on here. The federal lead and copper rule requires water suppliers to fix corrosive water so that lead levels are maintained at the tap. This is your legal responsibility, not the homeowners, not the schools, not the businesses. Over the past 20 years, you have known this, but have not fixed it, or you simply don't know what you're doing. We have a silent public health crisis going on here. How are citizens supposed to know otherwise that Portland Water Bureau or the Portland Water Commissioner, who is up for re-election, have not informed the public what we deserve to know? What kind of hold you guys have of the Oregon Health Authority that they have been so silent? I'm beginning to question the relationship between the Oregon Health Authority's role as regulator of the Water Bureau. Who is watching whom? This is a failure of leadership at all levels, the city, the county, and the state, but you all are the ones who are responsible. I will end with a comment made by former Representative, now Senator Tammy Duckworth, at the 2016 House Oversight Committee on Flint. Would you not rather have jumped in too soon, despite the law, to protect the children of Flint and be hauled into Congress to testify about why you stepped in too quickly to safeguard health, as opposed to why you didn't act soon enough?
Thank you, Ms. White. Before I turn the gavel over to, back to the mayor, and we're going to acknowledge, do a special proclamation for the Grant boys basketball team. Mayor, I just want to briefly respond to something Ms. White just said, because I think it's important in a public forum like this that we get our facts right. We have no lead problem in our source water or our distribution. This is not an exchange deal. You're not welcome back to the days.
Well, you're not welcome to have the
You're
last
not,
word.
I actually, I get the last word. I am. So, because we keep having misleading information put in the public record, on this one instance, I have to correct it. We do not have lead problem in our source water, our distribution system. We've removed the lead pigtails. We're one of the few cities who has done that. We do have so-called high-risk homes with bad plumbing and faucets, and in a small subset of those homes, we are working with homeowners to take precautions. That the only safe response is to take the lead out of the plumbing. That's why water fountains are being replaced in the high schools and the public schools. And that is the safest option is to remove the lead that's in the household plumbing. Plumbing which for a number of years has failed to meet the building code. That is the only way we can once and for all fix this problem. But the idea that there is lead in either the source water or the distribution system is false.
I didn't say that.
Well, I said it. Mayor, I'm going to turn it back over to you so that we can, I can hardly wait. We can honor the champion high school basketball.
Very good. And are we ready to do that, Commissioner?
I think we have a coach here.
Very good. Commissioner Fish.
Coach,
Commissioner Saltzman. And by the way, before Dan speaks, I'm sorry I was late this morning. We have a mayor visiting from the Ukraine upstairs, and as mayor, it is my pleasure, as well as my obligation, to greet visiting dignitaries. For those of you who spoke during communications and I was not able to hear your communications, you have my word, I will both read your written testimony as well as watch the videotaped record. And I